There is this specific and really annoying phase of a breakup, or really the end of any intense situation in your life that nobody ever warns you about.
Hmm.
The dust has settled. You've had the closure talk. You've, returned the sweatshirt. Logic has fully kicked in. And you know for a fact that it's over.
Right. The facts are all on the table. The jury has reached its verdict.
Exactly. But then there's this thing, this like lingering feeling that just refuses to clock out.
Yeah.
It's not denial because you aren't delusional. You know you aren't getting back together.
Yeah.
And it's not really optimism because you aren't actually looking forward to anything. It's just this stubborn, quiet presence.
It's a haunting.
Yeah.
A very specific and I think very human haunting.
And usually when we feel that, we try to crush it. We tell ourselves, I'm being an idiot, or I just need to move on. We treat it like a bug in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But today we're doing a deep dive into an essay that suggests we might be looking at this whole refusal to leave thing all wrong.
Yeah. It is a fascinating piece. It's called The Hope That Would Not Let Go by the writer and philosopher Pedro Mala.
Right.
And I have to say, this is not your typical self-help 5 steps to getting your groove back kind of article. It's much more of a philosophical autopsy of a feeling we've all had but rarely, if ever, name.
It's definitely a dissection. So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack Malha's very unique definition of this specific type of hope. Because, as he puts it, this isn't the loud, cinematic hope we're used to seeing in movies.
No, it's not the hero running through the rain.
Not at all.
And that's maybe the most important distinction to start with. Mala isn't talking about the run through the airport to stop the plane kind of hope.
Yeah.
He's talking about something much quieter, much more involuntary, and frankly, much harder to kill because it's so quiet.
So let's start with how this hope arrives, because Malha argues it's not something we invite in. It's not like we wake up and say, you know what, I think I'll hold on to a painful shred of attachment today.
No, not at all. We tend to think of hope as an active verb, something we do. I hope it rains, or I hope she calls.
It implies agency.
It implies agency. But Mala argues that this specific residual hope did not announce itself as a choice, a conviction, or a belief. It's an intruder.
I just love the imagery he used to describe its arrival. He says it attaches itself to what was already there, the way a thought lingers after the conversation that produced it has ended.
It's such a vivid image. Think about hanging up the phone after a really long, intense call. Maybe an argument, maybe a confession. The line is dead.
Right.
The connection is physically severed. But the echo of the voice is still sort of bouncing around in your skull for a few minutes. You haven't chosen to keep hearing it. It's just residue.
And by the time you realize this hope is basically squatting in your brain, it's already moved in, unpacked its bags, and probably changed the Wi-Fi password.
And it didn't ask for permission. And crucially, Mala points out that this hope did not need to make sense. We spend so much energy trying to rationalize our feelings, asking, why do I feel this way? It's illogical. But Mala's pointing out that this hope, it bypasses the logic center of the brain entirely. It operates on a different frequency.
Which brings us to the real conflict of the essay, which is this tension between what we know to be true and what we continue to feel. Mala sets the stage with a scenario of total clarity.
Yeah.
He's not talking about a will they, won't they situation with mixed signals.
No, he's very clear on that.
Yeah.
He describes a situation where everything necessary has been said. Boundaries are named. The ending is acknowledged. Nothing is hidden. It's a clean break, legally and verbally speaking.
In a logical world, that clarity should act like a disinfectant, right? It should just wipe the slate clean.
Totally.
If I know the door is locked, I stop trying to turn the handle. But Mala observes that this hope doesn't just dissolve because the truth arrived.
And that's the counterintuitive part. We assume truth kills hope, like rock beats scissors. But Mala says, no, hope adapts. It doesn't fight the clarity, it shifts.
How does it shift?
It changes from an expectation of a future into something that lived alongside clarity rather than in opposition to it.
Okay, that's a tricky concept, alongside clarity. So I can fully understand that my ex and I are done. I can sign the papers, I can lease a new apartment, and yet this hope is still just sitting there.
It's living in the spare room of your brain. It becomes what he calls a second voice. It knows it's not the boss anymore. It knows the facts are in charge, but it never fully falls silent.
It speaks with less confidence.
With less confidence, sure, but it's still whispering.
It's like a tenant who lost the lease but is hiding in the attic so you don't call the police. It's just trying to stay out of trouble while refusing to leave.
That's actually a surprisingly accurate analogy, because to avoid detection, it learns to survive on almost nothing. Malha writes about how this hope did not insist on promises.
Right.
It stops asking for the big things like marriage or reconciliation or a future together. Instead, it feeds on fragments.
Fragments. That part really hit home for me, because we've all been there, subsisting on crumbs. What kind of fragments is he talking about?
Well, you list them. A tone that softened unexpectedly. A message that arrived without necessity. A moment of attention that did not carry obligation.
Oh, man. The message without necessity, that is the classic hey text or the random meme sent 3 months post-breakup.
Exactly. And your logical brain looks at that meme and says, this means nothing. Picture of a cat. It changes nothing about our incompatibility.
But this residual hope.
It grabs that crumb and it feasts on it.
But, and this is important, does it use that crumb to build a case that you're getting back together? Is it like building a lawsuit for love?
No. And this is where Malha is just brilliant. He says hope doesn't use those fragments as evidence for a future trial. It uses them as places to rest.
Places to rest. Wow. That is, honestly, that's kind of heartbreakingly beautiful.
It really is. It's not building a roadmap to a reunion. It's just looking for a spot to sit down for a minute and feel connected again. It's exhausted. It doesn't claim things will change. It only insists that something still exists.
That's an argument for continuity, not restoration.
Exactly.
It's not saying we will be lovers again. It's just saying we are not strangers.
Precisely. It's trying to prevent the slide into total nothingness. It's holding the door open just an inch, not so you can walk through it, but just so the room doesn't go completely dark.
Okay, so if this hope isn't demanding a future, and it isn't fighting the facts, why is it so impossible to get rid of? Usually, if you starve something of attention and validation, it dies. That's basic psychology. But Malha argues this hope is practically indestructible.
And this is where we have to get a little technical about the mechanics of belief versus this detached hope. Malha argues that the difficulty isn't that hope misreads reality. The difficulty is that it no longer depends on reality to survive.
That sounds like a superpower. Or a curse, maybe both.
Yeah. Well, think about it like this. If hope needed to be fulfilled, if it needed a specific outcome, like a wedding, to exist, you could kill it by proving the wedding isn't happening.
Right. You show the evidence, the hope dies. Cause and effect.
But once hope detaches itself from the need to be fulfilled, it becomes immune to disappointment. It has, gone rogue. It stops caring about the outcome.
It's off the grid. It's living in the woods, eating berries.
It doesn't require a future where it's rewarded. Malha writes that it continues sustained by its own momentum, by the fact that it has been there for so long that removing it would feel like a loss in itself.
It exists simply because it exists.
It just exists.
Which explains why we can't shame ourselves out of it. And Lord knows we try. I'm being so stupid. Why do I still care? This is embarrassing. I'm a grown adult. Why am I analyzing an emoji? I mean, I've said all of those things to myself.
We all have. We try to bully ourselves into healing. But Malha addresses that directly. He says those judgments never quite land because they assume the hope is trying to prove something. We're judging it as if it's a failed argument.
But it's not an argument.
It's not. It's not asking to be taken seriously or acted upon. It just exists in that narrow space between wanting and knowing.
Between wanting and knowing. That is such a precise coordinate for heartache. It's that limbo. You know it's over, but you want it to have mattered.
And what makes it even trickier to deal with, and Malha spent some time on this, is that this isn't ruining your life. This isn't the kind of grief where you can't get out of bed and you're listening to sad songs in the dark for weeks.
Right. He calls it the quiet burden.
Yes. He contrasts this with the dramatic, cinematic version of heartbreak. This hope isn't consuming. It doesn't disrupt your daily life. You're going to work, you're hitting your deadlines, you're meeting friends, you might even be dating new people.
It's a quiet undercurrent, which, in a way, feels worse. Because if I was a total mess, my friends would stage an intervention.
Totally.
They'd bring wine and force me to talk about it. But if I'm living a functional, outwardly coherent life, nobody knows I'm carrying this thing. I'm sort of suffering in secret.
Exactly. The coexistence makes it harder to name as a problem to be solved. You're functioning, you look fine. But internally, there's this emotional residue. Malha notes that conversations return in memory not because they're unresolved, he's very clear the ending was final, but because the emotional residue doesn't match the finality of the words.
The mind accepted the conclusion. The life adjusted accordingly. The hope stayed. That disconnect is maddening. It makes you feel like you're going crazy.
It does.
Like, I understand English, I understand what goodbye means, so why is this feeling still here?
It does make you feel divided against yourself. And look at how the hope behaves to maintain that stay. It recalibrates, it shifts gears. Mala points out that hope handles disappointment by lowering its profile. It doesn't get louder.
Yeah.
It learns to expect less without disappearing.
It's bargaining, isn't it? But in a really sad, minimal way, it stops hoping for a relationship and starts hoping for, what does he say? Softness rather than commitment.
Softness rather than commitment. Presence rather than continuation. It limits itself to what cannot be disproven.
Yeah.
You can prove you aren't getting back together. You can't prove that the connection is entirely meaningless. So hope retreats to that bunker, the bunker of it mattered.
Which brings us to the loneliness of it all, because if you're carrying this thing that you don't even really believe in yourself, you can't exactly talk about it at brunch.
No.
You can't turn to your friend and say, I'm still holding on to a glance he gave me 3 weeks ago.
Maha calls it a particular loneliness.
Mm.
If you say it aloud, it sounds like denial. It sounds like you're refusing to move on.
But you have moved on, practically speaking. Your life is moving forward. Your calendar is full.
Exactly. So you're stuck in this internal conflict.
You're carrying it, but you're not endorsing it. You're not rooting for it.
And that distinction carrying versus believing is the core of Malha's thesis. He writes, it would be inaccurate to say that hope was believed. Belief implies agreement, endorsement, trust.
Right.
This hope did not require any of that. It was carried.
That makes me think of being at the airport and someone asks you to watch their bag for a second and then they never come back. It's not your bag. You don't want it. You're not going to wear the clothes inside.
Yeah.
But you can't just walk away from it, so you're just standing there, stuck with it.
That is a perfect metaphor. And that luggage occupies space. It creates a state of being occupied. You aren't hopeful, you aren't optimistic, but you aren't hopeless either. You're just full.
It's an emotional excess that has nowhere to go.
Exactly. But here's where Malha offers something that feels like a hug.
Yeah.
He validates it. He says this hope resists being named as a mistake.
This is a crucial pivot in the essay.
It is. Up until this point, we've been treating this hope as a parasite, something to be excised. But Malha frames it differently. He calls it a consequence of having cared.
Not a lesson, not a warning, but a trace.
I love that. It makes me feel less crazy for holding on to things. He says it doesn't claim fairness, it claims continuity. It is what remains when meaning refuses to collapse neatly into the past.
And meaning is messy. Relationships are messy. We want them to have these clean edges, start, middle, end, file closed, archive the emails. But emotions don't have geometry like that.
No.
Malha is suggesting that this hope is simply the refusal of meaning to just vanish. It's the persistence of value. It's your heart saying, that was real.
It's the receipt, right. You keep the receipt not because you're going to return the item, but just to prove you bought it.
Exactly.
So we have this persistent, quiet, indestructible, lonely hope. The million-dollar question, when everyone listening is probably screaming at their phone right now, is how does it end? Or does it?
Yeah.
Because I'm getting irritated just talking about it. I want to fix it. I want the solution. And that irritation is totally normal. Malha mentions that irritation, the feeling that hope is refusing to cooperate with our understanding of the world. But he reminds us, hope in this form doesn't present itself as a problem to be solved.
It presents itself as a fact.
As a fact. You can't solve a fact, you just have to deal with it. Gravity's a fact, you don't solve gravity.
Precisely.
And there is, as Malha puts it, a peculiar dignity in that persistence. It's not noble or brave, it's ordinary, it's inconvenient. But it's the residue of attachment when attachment has nowhere left to go.
I think that's why this essay hits so hard. It acknowledges the human contradiction. We can understand that something is over and still long for it in the same breath. Malha says that doesn't make us foolish.
It just makes us human.
We're capable of holding two opposing truths at once.
Yes, the truth of the ending and the truth of the feeling. We don't have to force them to cancel each other out. We just have to be wide enough to hold both.
But seriously, does it ever go away? Does Malha give us an exit strategy, a ritual, a fire to burn the letters in?
Well, he warns against looking for a breaking point. There is no cinematic climax where you throw the locket into the ocean and suddenly the music swells and you're free.
So no montage sequence, no makeover scene.
No montage. Malha suggests that hope doesn't shatter, it thins.
It thins. Can you unpack that? What does a thinning hope even look like?
It becomes diffuse, it spreads out, it becomes a shape rather than a desire. It stops being about a specific person or a specific outcome and just becomes a quiet orientation that persists without aim. It loses its density.
That feels strangely real. It doesn't snap. It just slowly runs out of batteries.
And importantly, this process is beyond choice. Malha takes issue with the concept of letting go.
Oh, I hate that phrase. Just
Yeah.
let it go. Like it's a balloon I'm holding by a string. If I could just let go, I would have done it 6 months ago.
Right. It implies it's easy.
Mm.
Malha argues that letting go implies a decision, an act of will. I am choosing to drop this. But this hope exists in a space where will doesn't apply.
So what does he say?
He writes, "It is not clung to. It is not resisted. It is simply present. You can't decide to stop feeling a quiet background presence. You just have to wait for the background to change."
The self continues, new experiences happen, other desires take over, and this hope just, it fades into the wallpaper.
It is not sharp enough to hurt constantly. It is not strong enough to guide behavior. It is just there until perhaps one day it isn't, or maybe it stays forever as a tiny trace. And Malha's final point is that the hope is okay with that uncertainty.
Oddly content to exist without meaning, without direction, without promise.
It's a radical acceptance of our own internal landscape. We don't have to landscape the garden perfectly. We can let some weeds grow in the corner as long as they aren't choking the flowers.
So let's recap where we've been, because this was a journey through the emotional attic. We started with this hope that arrives quietly, uninvited, after the conversation is over. We talked about how it survives on fragments, those tiny texts or soft moments, and adjusts to clarity rather than fighting it.
We looked at its indestructibility, how by detaching from the need for fulfillment, it becomes immune to reality. It stops needing results to keep living.
Right, and we discussed the burden of carrying it while living a totally functional life, feeling that disconnect between your actions and your emotions.
And we touched on the loneliness of carrying something you don't even believe in, that luggage that isn't yours. And finally, the reality that it doesn't end with a bang, but with a slow, thinning fade.
It's a journey from irritation to acceptance.
It really is. It's a shift from viewing this lingering feeling as a pathology, something wrong with you that needs a cure, to viewing it as a natural, if inconvenient, byproduct of connection. It's the cost of doing business with other human hearts.
It's like finding a receipt in your pocket from a great dinner 3 months ago. You don't need it. It's trash, technically. But for a second, you look at it and you remember the meal. And you don't throw it out immediately. You just put it back in your pocket.
And that's okay. You don't have to empty your pockets every single day.
So here is where I want to leave you today. A thought to chew on as you go about your functional, coherent lives. Mala talks a lot about how we try to intervene with our emotions, to manage them like a project at work.
Right? The urge to fix,
Yeah.
to optimize, to debug ourselves.
But consider this. Mal suggests that emotional persistence doesn't always correspond to external action. Just because you feel hope doesn't mean you have to do anything about it. You don't have to text them. You don't have to suppress it. You don't have to analyze it. So ask yourself, if this hope is simply a trace of something that mattered, does it actually need to be extinguished? Or can you just let it sit there in the corner of the room until it naturally runs out of fuel on its own?
Maybe the most radical thing you can do is absolutely nothing at all. Sometimes letting it be is the only way to eventually let it go.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.